searching for victims of the terrorist attacks and not hopeful. It is difficult and dangerous work, as the latest pictures show. Was there a lost opportunity in the investigation? The president is very tough today and says the nation will have to be even tougher when they know who it is. The nation tries to get on with life as tough as it is. It is a hard task for all.
From ABC News, World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight, Saturday. Reporting tonight, Peter Jennings.
Good evening, everybody. As you all know in the country is trying to get on with life and yet having to deal with a new set of realities. We are going to begin this Saturday night with the latest things that we actually know. President Bush has said for the first time today that Osama bin Laden is a prime suspect in these attacks on the country. Mr. Bush also said that when the country is sure who did this, he will not settle for a token response. Here in New York, the painstaking search of the trade tower rubble has not produced any survivors. The city says 4,972 people are missing and unaccounted for. At the Pentagon, where they say 188 people are missing and unaccounted for, we've had a closer look from the inside at how much damage the terrorists actually did. We do not know the precise state of the investigation, but we do know this evening that there may have been, in very general terms, a lost opportunity in this investigation even before the terrorist attacks occurred. And we will, of course, get to that as well. But we're going to start with the President's Day. As I said, he's been very tough, and ABC's Terry Moran joins us this evening from Camp David. Terry?
Well, Peter, the President's fierce words and grim tone, as you note, were carefully calculated and measured, all part of the effort, as one top aide put it, to educate the public about the challenge ahead. At Camp David, the president met with his national security team. His mood was defiant.
There's no question about it. This act will not stand. We will find those who did it. We will smoke them out of their holes. We will get them running, and we'll bring them to justice.
As for bin Laden,
there is no question he is what we would call a prime suspect. And if he thinks he can hide and run from the United States and our allies, he will be sorely mistaken.
But that, as President Bush has acknowledged, will be a hugely difficult task against a phantom enemy. And it will require sacrifices from the American people that the president, in his weekly radio address, began to call for.
You will be asked for your patience, for the conflict will not be short. You will be asked for resolve, for the conflict will not be easy. You will be asked for your strength, because the course to victory may be long.
The aim of today's meeting, planning the government's comprehensive response to the terror, from the investigation to domestic needs, from diplomatic efforts to military options. Secretary of State Powell said the scope of the campaign would be vast.
And what we have to do is not just go after these perpetrators and those who gave them haven, but the whole curse of terrorism that is upon the face of the earth.
White House officials know how crucial the public's role in this campaign is, and they are actively considering the president's next major public appearance, a trip somewhere out in the middle of the country. Peter, they know security issues remain paramount, but as one top aide put it, we know how powerful that trip would be.
Thanks, Terry. Terry Moran at Camp David with the President tonight. In the international community, there's pressure on everybody as well, this sort of are you with us or against us policy of the United States at the moment. Pakistan said today it is going to cooperate with the United States in any international military response to Tuesday's attacks. The White House, you know, gave Pakistan a list of demands, including closing its borders with Afghanistan, where the Taliban has been giving sanctuary to Osama bin Laden for a long period of time. There are a tremendous number of options for a very, very complicated international situation. And so now let's go next to the State Department, where Martha Raddatz has been covering both the military and the political dimension of this today. Martha?
The military scenarios that the president has before him are extensive. A senior military official tells ABC News they even include ground troops. But first, the U.S. has to find bin Laden. The Americans have gone after the accused terrorist before. Cruise missiles were launched into Afghanistan in 1998 after the embassy bombings in Africa. Some of Osama bin Laden's bunkers were wiped out, but the bombs missed him. Any bombing campaign against bin Laden now would be even more difficult.
We have to be able to locate him and identify where he's at and where he's moving. That may be too late. It could well be that he himself has left the country.
But senior military officers say this war on terrorism could go beyond bin Laden to the ruling Taliban in Afghanistan who have harbored him. Military hardware could be hit, communications towers, anything which would disrupt the Taliban's power base. Sending in ground troops, however, would be complicated and dangerous.
All you can do is essentially repeat the Soviet mistake or the British mistake, which ended in military disaster for both countries.
Senior military leaders are recommending extensive airstrikes. They don't want a repeat of the 1998 bombing. And Peter, expect extensive use of special forces.
Many thanks, Martha Raddatz, who actually is at the Pentagon today. She's been going back and forth between that and her usual beat at the Pentagon. Now let's turn to the latest investigation. As we said, there's nothing particular on the public record. The FBI, the Justice Department in general, the intelligence agencies have all been very tight-lipped about this, as we expected. But ABC's Brian Ross has now been looking at what may have been a lost opportunity for the United States before this attack occurred. Brian? Brian, hang on a sec. Brian, hang on a sec. I don't think we absolutely hear you clearly.
His name is Habib Zacharias Moussaoui, 33 years old. Instructors at the Pan Am Flight School said they called the FBI on August 17th after Moussaoui showed up offering cash and asking for lessons on a 747 flight simulator. He reportedly was not interested in takeoffs and landings, only how to fly the plane in a horizontal position.
The idea of somebody showing up at a 747, a professional flight school, and saying, I just want to learn how to fly horizontal is absurd in the extreme. Nobody would put him in the seat.
After the flight school tip, Moussaoui was taken into custody on immigration charges, and FBI agents then traced him back to another flight school he had attended earlier this year in Norman, Oklahoma. The flight school manager in Oklahoma told ABC News that FBI agents seemed very concerned about Moussaoui's intentions.
We asked him what the circumstances were with him, and they didn't really indicate anything other than that, well, he did something very bad.
It's not known whether Moussaoui was supposed to have any role in this week's attacks, but the former director of counterterrorism for the CIA says his activities should have set off alarm bells.
The information that was known in August about Moussaoui, particularly from foreign intelligence services, was that he was a member of bin Laden's organization, Al-Qaeda. And that should have been a very large warning flag if that information had been put together in Washington. It was not.
Now federal agents are taking Moussaoui very seriously. He is one of the 25 people being detained. Yesterday, he was taken from the county jail in Minnesota and removed to an undisclosed location. Peter?
Many thanks, Brian Ross. And just to confirm that FBI sources do say, of course, they're looking for connections to Osama bin Laden. And what made them suspicious was that huge amount of cash offered to the flying school. And now let's look at the political support for the president. Last night, the House of Representatives voted to give the president the authority to use force in this campaign against terrorism. And ABC's Linda Douglas joins us from Capitol Hill. And Linda, it was almost unanimous.
It was a very passionate debate, Peter, with even Democrats and Republicans as well saying this is a war of good versus evil. We've got to crush terrorism. Some Democrats raised questions about whether it gave the president too much power, but only one member of Congress, a Democrat, Barbara Lee of California, voted no, and she said that the United States should not retaliate by killing innocent civilians.
I struggled and agonized over how I could make a statement on behalf of those who are afraid right now, who don't know if this is going to spiral out of control, and the right position and the moral position. And ultimately, I had to search myself and my God for direction.
Now, Lee told me today she realizes she'll go down in history as the only member who voted against this action. She says she feels she's in a very lonely place, Peter.
Now, Linda, there's a struggle, or something of a struggle, in the House about whether or not the federal government should come along and give aid to the airlines, which have been hurting so much this week.
There was a real fight last night. They tried very hard to vote in the House to give the airlines $15 billion to bail them out. But some members said they just didn't have enough details to vote on it. Others said they're getting pressured by other industries, such as the insurance industry. They would like money, too. They were hoping they'd be able to send a signal to the markets when they open on Monday that they're going to bail out the airline industry, but they were just not able to reach an agreement, Peter.
Okay, many thanks. ABC's Linda Douglas. On Capitol Hill, this takes us to the general economic dilemma that the airlines have been suffering. We're joined by ABC's Betsy Stark. This has been particularly tough, we know today, on 3 American airlines.
That's right, Peter. Continental, Northwest, and American each said they're cutting their flight schedules by 20%. Continental also said it was furloughing 12,000 employees, not laying them off, but letting them go for a extended indefinite vacation. The real possibility of bankruptcy looms for these airlines. They were already losing hundreds of millions of dollars in a weak economy. Now with these additional security measures required and passengers afraid to fly, they're losing a lot more money. Let me tell you that in a press conference today, Gordon Bethune, the chairman of Continental, said, "We need our Congress to intervene and save our industry, and if it doesn't, I can't tell you," he said, "that this is the only furlough you're going to see."
And there was one thing today which really absolutely did surprise me in terms of all the restrictions. I hadn't thought about this one of cargo.
That's right, Peter. The FAA now says that commercial cargo may not travel in the belly of a passenger plane. That is how the electronics industry got a lot of its parts transported from Asia. So the people who make phones and computers and rely on Taiwan and South Korea to send chips and other parts to them through passenger traffic say, if we don't find another way to get those parts soon, we're going to have to stop producing.
Enough pressure, do you think, to get the FAA to loosen up on this one?
The chairman of the major airlines are due to meet with the transportation secretary on Tuesday. I'll bet you that's going to be one of the things on the agenda.
Okay, now the New York Stock Exchange, which is among the places on your normal beat, had a test today to see whether or not it was ready to open on Monday. How did it do?
Chairman Dick Rosso says all systems go. The exchange passed the test. I think it might be more accurate to say all systems are good enough to go, and they will be using every hour they have between now and Monday morning, the exchange and all the brokerage firms in the surrounding area to improve their readiness.
Okay, many thanks, Betsy Stark. I want to return now to the whole question of air travel. Were you trying to get anywhere today? A great many Americans have been trying so intensely throughout the week to get where they want to go. One of the airports that had, of course, the greatest difficulty and in sense has the greatest responsibility, that's not true, the sense of responsibility on its shoulders these days, is Logan Airport in Boston. So we asked ABC's Ron Claiborne to spend some time on that.
At Logan Airport, state police were posted at security checkpoints and inside the control tower. The security measures were even stricter than what the FAA had ordered for all U.S. airports. Federal marshals and the heavily armed state troopers patrolled the terminals, and passengers were subjected to random ID and luggage checks.
And we walk through here, and there's some U.S. Marshals everywhere on the way out of here, so it makes you feel safer.
Even though the airport was open, many of the 1,300 scheduled flights were canceled. Those that did take off were often delayed by hours. The American Airlines terminal was filled with passengers, in part because some arrived as much as 8 hours early to avoid long lines. Here and throughout the country, there were plenty of nervous air travelers.
I'm going to be honest with you. This morning, around 2:30, I looked at her and I said, I don't know if we want to do this. And she looked at me and said, we're doing it.
In Miami, security officers took the unusual step of checking vehicles that pulled up to drop off passengers. In Chicago, a man was detained after he said he was carrying a bomb and a knife in his bag. At Dulles Airport, police cracked down on vehicles that parked next to the terminal.
You cannot leave a vehicle here. Have you not been listening to what's been going on?
Washington's Reagan National Airport is the only major airport still closed. But starting tonight, airlines will be allowed to fly their empty planes elsewhere. With National closed, Amtrak has been doing booming business. For the most part, air travelers said they are willing to put up with the long lines, cancellations, delays, and confusion because many said it is the price they will have to pay for greater security for themselves and for the country. Ron Claiborne, ABC News, Boston.
And now we turn to the principal crime scene, which is, of course, here in New York. This has been another day of enormous effort, extraordinary effort, to try to find out whether underneath all that rubble there are still survivors. Many people have asked, where did the trade towers go? Well, it's going in part 1,000 tons of debris already delivered to a location in Staten Island. As we mentioned at the top of the broadcast, the official number of missing is now 4,972. That is up 200 from yesterday. And we check now on the scene here today with ABC's Bob Jamieson. Bob?
Peter, it's not possible from our usual vantage points to appreciate the scale of the devastation at the spot where the Twin Towers stood. It is only when you come here to Ground Zero, as cameraman Tim Cothran did today. This was a fire truck. This, a remnant of life before Tuesday morning. At the base of what was the South Tower, the second building hit, there is a gaping crevice hundreds of feet wide. A makeshift bridge of fire ladders lashed together has been thrown across. Search teams gingerly edged along it today, only to climb another set of ladders at the other side. And the firemen are confronted by a peak of tangled girders, some of the 250,000 tons of steel in the two towers. A misstep can be dangerous. This fireman suffered a broken leg today. Lines of workers passing buckets from hand to hand are removing the rubble 5 gallons at a time. The mayor's office said today that 20,000 tons has been removed so far. There is another 1.25 million tons to go. There are so many workers now at Ground Zero that just keeping track of them, let alone coordinating their efforts, what to remove and when, is a problem.
Well, who's working over there?
The primary task is still the search for survivors. Dogs were in use again today. Since Wednesday, they have found only the dead. And when they left Ground Zero today for a few hours' rest, there was applause for the exhausted firemen. Another difficult job for the firemen is sustaining the optimism that now, on the 5th day, some of the 4,900 missing, Peter, will still be found alive.
Thank you very much, Bob Jamieson at Ground Zero, where he's been since the very beginning of this. In Pennsylvania, we actually reported this yesterday. The cockpit voice recorder was found yesterday. It's now been sent to its manufacturer, and our sources are telling us there is concern about possible damage to the device. The airline was going at about 500 miles per hour when it crashed. Still missing in the ruins of the Trade Center, of course, are the 4 recorders that were aboard those 2 flights. Now we go to the Pentagon. We said at the beginning of the broadcast, the Pentagon has now said that they believe 188 people are unaccounted and missing, and we have been looking at the Pentagon throughout the week from the outside. That enormous gash in the building, the American flag now flying beside it. The Secretary of Defense went out there and looked at it the other day. But now we have a slightly different perspective because the Pentagon has released some video, which ABC's John Yang in Washington tells us about.
The new pictures vividly show the devastating power unleashed when the hijacked airliner slammed into the Pentagon. The tremendous heat of flaming jet fuel. The daily routine suddenly and brutally interrupted. A moment frozen in time. The plane punched almost completely through the building.
The airplane traveled in a path about like this, and the nose of the aircraft broke through this innermost wall of C-ring into AE drive.
5 days later, the horror is still overwhelming.
Anything like this, I would not probably be describing it adequately to you. You know, it's just not capable of putting in words the type of destruction, that type of death that you're seeing or we're seeing.
It could have been much worse. The plane hit a section recently strengthened to protect against a terrorist attack. Columns reinforced with steel and windows made blast resistant. The structure held for nearly a half hour before collapsing, giving the injured a better chance of escape.
The fact that they happened to hit an area that we had built so sturdily was a wonderful gift.
In a perverse way.
In a perverse way.
Workers continue to stabilize the structure so other operations can proceed. So far, remains of fewer than half the dead have been recovered.
We do expect to be in this particular mode for approximately another 10 days. as we move forward with the process of, as you might imagine, the very arduous task of removing bodies.
So much water was poured on the building to put the fires out, officials are now worried about the telephone and computer networks. Repairing the building will be a massive undertaking that will take years. John Yang, ABC News, the Pentagon.
I think we needn't tell you anywhere in the country what an extraordinarily difficult weekend this is. Here in New York today, it was a beautiful, sunny day, and as they dug away at the trade towers, thousands and thousands of people began to try to readjust their lives, as we said at the beginning of the broadcast, always mindful at what had happened and equally mindful that you had to get on with life. By the way, we spent some time here this morning in New York talking to some children about this disaster. They were quite unusually eloquent, these young kids, and the network has decided to rebroadcast this program answering children's questions, and they, by the way, asked a lot of them too, at 1 o'clock Eastern Time tomorrow, 11 Pacific. It's 2 hours, and may we suggest it's an interesting thing to experience with your children. As the country tries to readjust, ABC's Brian Rooney has been watching and listening.
Millions of Americans returned to a semblance of normal today, even if they had to push themselves to do it. They did a little shopping in Georgia.
We came out to get a few gifts, and even though we don't really feel like shopping, but we're trying to make it normal.
They strolled in front of the White House, a place that may have been a target on Tuesday. It was a day to ride a bicycle in Los Angeles.
And it's almost like you cling to your regular activities so that you can keep remaining normal and keep functioning, because otherwise you might get overwhelmed.
It was a day to fly a model airplane.
It helps, yeah. It's recreational. It helps flying these airplanes.
The country can't return fully to normal because life is still not normal. There's no Major League Baseball this weekend, no NFL tomorrow. But there were still plenty of sporting events in the country today. Despite the decision of professional sports, a lot of schools and amateur athletic leagues decided they would go ahead with their schedules this weekend. Today in this park in Sherman Oaks, California, 1,700 children are playing soccer.
We are very sympathetic to all the families that have lost lives or friends, but we think the kids' best thing is to get back into their regular routine.
A lot of people would like to get back to their regular routine.
I guess I'm trying to almost force myself to start doing things again, seeing my family, going out, starting to see friends.
But there are lingering reminders over every event that normal is not what it was only a few days ago. Brian Rooney, ABC News, Los Angeles.
And as everybody in the country knows, it's not going to be very long before we see, and in many cases participate, in a great many funerals. Here in New York, the first of many funerals for the firefighters. 300 firefighters in the New York department have died. Today, there were funerals for 2 of the senior officers, including the first deputy commissioner. Many of the firefighters who would normally attend funerals in this show of brotherhood could not attend for all the obvious reasons. Actually, for the one obvious reason, they were working, trying to find the victims. The department also paid its respects to a beloved chaplain who died on the job on Tuesday. Here's ABC's Dan Harris.
Fire Department Chaplain Father Michael Judge took care of the men who take care of us. Fittingly, his funeral mass was held in the church where he lived, directly across the street from the fire station where he worked. Tuesday morning, when Father Mike, as he was known, heard about the attack, he changed out of his habit and into his firefighter uniform, then rushed to the scene. While giving last rites to a dying firefighter, Father Mike took off his helmet out of respect. He was hit by falling rubble. Firefighters carried his body to a local church and placed it on the altar.
Look how that man died. He was right where the action was, where he always wanted to be. He was talking to God, and he was helping someone. Can you honestly think of a better way to die?
Father Mike's body was the first to be removed from Ground Zero, and his friend, Father Duffy, who delivered the homily today, says he believes there's a reason for that. Father Mike, he says, will greet people on the other side.
And he's going to greet them with that big Irish smile. He's going to take them by the arm and the hand and say, welcome. I want to take you to my Father.
A wrenching scene made worse by the knowledge that soon there may very well be thousands more like it. Dan Harris, ABC News, New York.
On this weekend and in these days ahead here in New York City and in many parts of the country, there is a clear feeling among people, many people anyway, that they need to be together. Manhattan's Union Square, 30 blocks north of the World Trade Center, has become one of those important places where people need to be together. The square is increasingly crowded by flags and artwork and candles and other mementos in memory of the thousands of people who are presumed to be dead. And if you listen very carefully, you hear mostly silence. And finally then, in this half hour, bravery and appreciation. As we were walking between ABC buildings today, we stopped in at our local fire hall. This is just one fire station, and they lost 11 men in this disaster. And it was deeply impressive to see how the local community had showed up to just show solidarity. Ernest Hemingway once said that bravery is grace under pressure. And F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote, "Show me a hero, and I will write you a tragedy." As firefighters and other relief workers continue to hunt in the rubble for any sign of life, and it is still very dangerous for them, they know by now that people all over the country pray that they will be successful and safe.
Rescue 5's up there. Okay. Thank you.
And that is our report on this edition of World News Tonight, Saturday. Where you are, perhaps the country is beginning to feel vigorous again. Perhaps it's noisy again where you are. It certainly is in many parts of New York City. But we have found one place after another where it is still very important for people to be silent, even in public. I'm Peter Jennings. Good night.
Save up to 80% buying Factory Direct. The Jewelry Factory makes most of their jewelry in their state-of-the-art factory, imports their diamonds direct, and guarantees the lowest price. Compare Tiffany's 1-carat platinum band for $5,800 with the Jewelry Factory's for $1,500. 1-carat hearts are $199, 2-carat bracelets $349, 1-carat studs $399. The Jewelry Factory has a huge selection and guarantees all the jewelry they make to appraise for at least double. Buy Factory Direct. The Jewelry Factory in Bethesda.
ABC7 is on your side.
By making your mornings easier.
Weather and traffic every 10 minutes on the 7th.
Plus the news from overnight.
It's the Good Morning Washington Promise, and it's only on ABC7. Proud to be on your side.
In this ordinary home, Mom and Dad have a secret. Your parents are spies. Now, it's up to their kids to save them.
Remind me to place an allowance.
Spy Kids, rated PG, on video and DVD September 18th.
America Recovers, continuing coverage on ABC7.